Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so pumped to have you here today. Look, if you're a focused learner who absolutely loves breaking down exactly how incredible things are made, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're setting a really moody, highly artistic tone for a massive visual deep dive. We're going to look at the intersection of cinematic history, art theory, and digital science. And we're going to do it by completely reverse engineering a masterpiece.
So, check out this prompt. Epic anime protagonist standing alone on a neon-lit rooftop during heavy rain, glowing cyberpunk city in background, sharp jawline, silver-black messy hair, glowing blue eyes, long futuristic trench coat flowing in wind, cinematic lighting, dramatic atmosphere, ultra-detailed anime movie style, dynamic perspective, rain reflections, emotional intensity, high contrast colors, 4K masterpiece quality. Now, if you've spent any time on platforms like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, you've definitely seen prompts just like this. But instead of just feeding these words into an algorithm, we're going to use this exact text as our complete roadmap today. We're going to deconstruct what it actually takes for a human artist to create this image from scratch. Like, how do you physically draw a dynamic perspective? What makes lighting cinematic? How do you render emotional intensity? Well, let's find out.
All right, Section 1. Building the cyberpunk cityscape.
Let's start by constructing the literal foundation of our scene, right? That neon-lit rooftop and the sprawling cyberpunk city. Because before we can place our epic anime protagonist anywhere, we have to build the world they're standing in. To get that dynamic perspective our prompt is demanding, we have to deeply understand the horizon line. In traditional linear perspective, this is our ultimate anchor point. It's a visual boundary representing the actual height of the viewer's eyes. Knowing exactly where that horizon line is gives an artist a concrete measuring point. Without it, well, your buildings are just going to float, and that dramatic rooftop won't feel grounded in reality at all. Seeing this translated into practice is just super cool. When you establish that horizon line as a basic physical boundary, you can then perfectly align your protagonist and the flat plane they're standing on to vanishing points located directly on that line. That is how you place them firmly and believably on that rooftop. Every single group of parallel edges that is parallel to the ground shares vanishing points right on this same line. It's like this hidden geometry that suddenly makes an illustration feel like a real, traversable 3D space. So now that we have our perspective dialed in, what does our glowing cyberpunk city actually look like? We absolutely have to look back at the 1995 anime classic Ghost in the Shell, and specifically the work of art director Hiromasa Ogura, to really understand this aesthetic. The defining look of cyberpunk anime was heavily inspired by the densely packed, brutalist architecture of Hong Kong's Kowloon walled city before it was torn down. The whole vibe relies on contrasting these deteriorating, concrete urban landscapes with massive, sleek, high-rise buildings. And to make it feel cinematic, artists use low camera angles looking up to really emphasize that towering scale. Also, that hazy, dramatic atmosphere mentioned in our prompt, that was actually inspired by real life. Back in the day, Ogura's camera lens naturally misted up in the super humid Hong Kong night air, and it created this incredible, dreamlike halation effect around the city lights.
Moving right along to Section 2, neon lights and reflections.
Okay, let's see how we achieve these cinematic lighting and high contrast colors we asked for, because honestly, lighting is where the cyberpunk mood literally lives or dies. Drawing from the color theory we've seen in masterpieces like Blade Runner 2049, we have to construct a very specific visual contrast. On one side, we have this oppressive, low brightness background, a rainy cyberworld totally dominated by blacks, dark blues, and grays. Psychologically, this pulls out feelings of melancholy and the cold indifference of a high-tech world. But then, cutting right through that darkness are the high-purity colors, the intensely bright, saturated neon reds, yellows, and blues. This massive visual punch represents technological advancement, basically visually illustrating the extreme gap between the rich and the poor.
So how do we tactically render those high-purity rain reflections and glowing blue eyes on a digital canvas? If we look at digital illustration workflows from tools like Procreate, it is all about precise layering. First, you establish your base coloring. Then, and this is crucial, if you're drawing glowing glasses or neon reflections, you create a shadow layer that sits underneath the glass layer but on top of the base color. Next, you use clipping masks to precisely paint in the varying colors and reflections of those neon signs. Finally, and guys, this is the secret sauce, you create one final layer on top of everything, grab a soft white airbrush, and create that ethereal glowing neon bloom effect that just bleeds so beautifully right into the dark, rainy surroundings.
Which brings us to Section 3, designing the anime protagonist. Now we're shifting our focus directly onto our epic anime protagonist. How do we physically draw their defining features? Take that silver-black messy hair flowing in wind. Sounds simple enough, right? Actually, drawing hair in motion is incredibly complex. The trick here is to treat the hair almost like a helmet that shares the exact same perspective grid as the head. To avoid this excessive messiness that would just ruin the visual flow, master artists don't just scribble chaotic strands. They draw large, organized blocks of hair moving toward the axis of movement, and then they add the overlapping smaller strands later. This gives you organic depth and a sense of highly controlled, entirely believable movement in that dramatic wind.
And to inject the requested emotional intensity into that sharp jawline, we have to look at the actual mechanics of expression. Perfect symmetry, it just feels robotic. To make a character feel truly alive, artists use subtle facial asymmetry. Think like maybe just one corner of the mouth raised slightly, or a single eyebrow furrowed just a bit more. On top of that, animators love to use holds. This means pausing the animation on a sustained expression so the audience has a second to really absorb the emotion. If you pair that visual hold with dead silence in the soundtrack, you create a powerful multi-sensory void that hits incredibly hard. Finally, to make the character feel physically present in that glowing neon lighting, artists use subsurface scattering. This simulates how light penetrates and gently illuminates the skin and thin membranes, which adds just a crazy layer of realism to the shadows.
And finally, Section 4, Emotion, Lines, and Depth. For this final stage, we're going to slow the pacing down just a bit. We've built the world, we've lit the neon, we've drawn the character. Now let's talk about the thematic elements that actually elevate an image into a true masterpiece. The absolutely crucial point here is how master directors like Makoto Shinkai use the structural concept of the line. You see, in 2D animation, the line is the ultimate divider. It fundamentally separates the character from their environment. So when our prompt asks for a protagonist standing alone against a rainy backdrop, the literal drawn lines are intentionally isolating them from that sprawling city. It creates this beautiful visual paradox where stunning neon beauty exists right side by side with isolated, perhaps even traumatic solitude. The line gives their stance profound emotional weight.
As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with the final thought regarding the boundary between the artist, the viewer, and the canvas. Whether it's the physical line dividing the sky and the ground, the line separating those rich high-rises from the dark streets below, or the line isolating a character in their own emotional intensity, the prompt is written, the framework is built, the line is there. But whether you're feeding text into an AI or picking up a digital pen to draw it yourself, it's completely up to you to cross it. Thank you so much for exploring this cyberpunk masterpiece with me today. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll catch you in the next one.